Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. Just wanted to take a few moments to introduce myself. So I am Emily Rissman. I work for the Department of Corrections. I am our new Veteran Liaison Specialist. So one of my primary jobs is to help support and educate our current employees who are veterans and or currently serving service members, get connected to any benefits and resources that they might be interested in or eligible for based on their military service. I am also the chair for our military advisory committee. And one of the things that we have agreed on that we wanted to promote and start doing for our departments, departmental employees, is hosting these informational webinar style events via Zoom. So just wanted to reiterate for those who have just joined, this meeting is being recorded. So the intent is to post it for those who might not be able to participate live. They can come back to it at a later date and still review the content and the materials that Cynthia is going to be sharing with us today. Please keep in mind, disability compensation does have a lot to do with individual circumstances and individual health situations. So if you choose to input anything into the chat, please be aware of who you might be sending that to if it's regarding anything personal to you. If you would like to send it to Cynthia or myself, feel free to do so. But if you do choose to do the everyone feature, everybody in here will see that content. So just please be mindful of that throughout this. We will end right at 1:30. So it's not going to go on for beyond that time frame. We want to be courteous to everybody's work schedules and what they have planned for the rest of the day. So at this moment, I would like to introduce to you all Cynthia Engler. She works for the Michigan Veterans Affairs Agency. She is one of their veteran service officers who have been there for nearly 10 years now. I used to work with her when I was over there, so I'm glad and excited that she was able to join us for our first Zoom webinar. So Cynthia, would you like to say something?
Sure. Thank you, Emily. Thank you so much for having me. And I think I love when we do these partnerships between state agencies. I think it's it's definitely what this all should be about. And I just kind of will put my information in the end of the chat so that everybody who's joined can know how to get a hold of me. Again, like Emily said, we won't be talking any real specific kind of things today, just because that's best handled on a one-on-one basis for individual, concerns or situations. So I'm gonna, Emily, you want me to just dig right in, right? Okay,
right
all right. Okay, so overview of disability compensation benefits for applying for benefits from the VA. There's going to be 3 components that are needed for a successful claim. And it would start with having something that it's going to tie to that's on a period of active duty service to show that it was incurred or aggravated by that period of service. Usually that's in records. But when we find that it's not, we can sometimes build some things with lay statements. So we would like to have that in there, but if we don't, we can try, for another method to build that. In a lay statement for something would look like, hey, I had these problems, but I didn't want to go to sick call because, it just was frowned upon. And so I didn't. It could be something as simple as that. And lay statements can be very successful, so we do try to use them whenever we have missing component. So component number 1 is the active duty service piece. Component number 2 is going to be modern day diagnosis. And component number 3 is going to be a nexus or something that ties those 2 things together. So the VA doesn't want to see that you maybe had a sick call for something, they administered some type of treatment, and then when you exited the military, your exit physical showed no problems with that. And then let's say 20 years later, you've got a diagnosis. Usually, unless you can show ongoing treatment for that since the military, or again, a lay statement maybe showing why there wasn't that, then that nexus piece is almost the most important, depending on the amount of time you've been out of the military. So usually when those three things are in place, usually the claims will go through. It is an arbitrary thing because there is a VA decision maker that analyzes the information. Normally what they'll do is order an exam. It's called a C&P, compensation and pension examination. How those are done these days is the VA, every once in a while they'll still be at a VA facility, but most of the time they're outsourced to 3 different agencies that are kind of like third-party schedulers. But and they are doing things a little bit differently these days in that they will sometimes do some diagnostic testing and things like that, where if you go to a VA facility for it, they're not going to. They want the diagnosis in place when you start, when you turn in the claim. So there's some pros and cons to these third-party schedulers, but there is no way to orchestrate, how that's going to go. It's all up to the luck of the draw when it gets to the VA. I think it has to do with availability. And when you get with the third-party schedules, they all kind of have their own little network of providers. So pros for that process is usually they are a lot more, they do give more of a benefit of the doubt to it than it seems to be reported that people are getting from the ones that go to the VA doctors. And, I always tell people, some people will go to their exams and they'll be like, oh, it wasn't that good, or it was great. And I'm like, just wait until the end, because it's just a piece of information that goes into the total of all things that are considered for it. So when you go ahead and file a claim, the VA they're going to gather your military records. They're going to gather any records that you call out that were done at maybe a DOD military facility. And they're going to do that automatically. So there's no need to provide those things unless they come back and ask for them. Now, every once in a while, they're not able to get them. And they may then come and ask the claimant for the records. But most of the time they're able to obtain those, and it's part of what they will do no matter whether you provide them or not. They're still going to take that time and do that step. So normally, the claim is filed, the development starts. These days they're ordering the exams quite quickly. Usually within a couple of weeks, people are getting exam requests. And then the exam results come back, and then the VA takes all of the information that they have and issues a decision. And when that decision comes out, it sometimes is a full decision. Sometimes these days they're doing more of these deferrals or partial decisions to get the money, kind of what they are able to decide it quickly, and then leave the other ones for more development or more exams. And then, when it's all completed, everything will be decided. So one of the reasons that so let me backtrack kind of a little bit. So the VA offers different ways that people can file claims. There's VSO kind of coverage at the county, state, and national service organization levels. So any of those people, we all do the same thing. It's just we have a slightly different employer, if you will, but we all do the same thing. The reason that sometimes it's good to use that, I think the main benefit that we give people is, just upfront helping to define what we want to claim, organize the supporting documentation, or say, here's what I would do, here's what I would recommend, here's what you need to get for best results, in the end. And then also we are able to help you track that claim. And I almost want to feel like the most important thing that we do is help you track that claim, because sometimes the claims process is really counterintuitive to what you think would make sense. Sometimes there's some different things that go on with, I've seen them schedule people with all 3, third-party scheduler C&P providers. And, it just doesn't make sense to a lot of people. So we can just kind of help to say, okay, that's normal, you know, it's not logical, but it's normal. Don't be alarmed. It's all going to come together. You know, sometimes it almost becomes more of a coaching or just kind of a support type of role after the claim is filed. And then when the claim results come back, the most important thing we do is help you interpret those results and say, okay, you know, here's your next options, here's your next steps. Or, you know, here's what I see that doesn't look right to me. So if a claim goes out, gets decided, comes back, and is not, you know, it's not what the person would like to see, the claimant, then, you know, we can consult with you. Okay, well, here's what your options would be. As far as appeals go, the VSO usually will, you know, they'll be able to help you with your appeal. Or sometimes it's not even an appeal. Sometimes, let's say some new evidence got, some new diagnosis, some worsening of evidence happened after the claim was filed. At certain points, we can update the information and add it and have it considered. But other times it kind of is too late, or it's already past a certain point where that can be considered. So sometimes, hot on the heels of having a decision, we may end up filing another claim right after that, you know, either asking for increase, or if it was something that caused the claim to be denied, it would end up being what we call a supplemental claim, which falls under the appeals. And there would be that new evidence that would go in with that. The other part of an appeal, the other appeals options are, there is something called a higher level review, which normally that is going to be for something that is so clearly obvious that the VA missed something, or there's so much contradiction in the decision that it's like, could you guys please just take another look at that? Normally they will not consider any new evidence, even if you try to call out, hey, you know, you really missed something. It's almost like they have to see it themselves for that part to be successful. But it is something that can be done, and it is a relatively quick turnaround. And so it is kind of, could be a step on the way to then taking it to the BVA with a formal Board of Veterans Appeals claim. So I think I've pretty much given an overview. We were just concentrating on disability claims. So maybe it would be another session for healthcare and things like that, but.
Yes, we do plan to make this a little bit of a series. So we wanted to do small pieces of information for individuals, because we have a lot of folks who are veterans or currently serving, or they are family members. So everybody's kind of at different stages. Now, if a veteran or somebody currently serving is interested in working with a veteran service officer to file a disability compensation claim, what paperwork or documentation would you recommend for them to have available and bring to you during that first meeting?
So the most important thing is going to be the DD 214, most notably the last one. Like if someone has more than one, the last one is the one that we will need the information off of. I mean, if they have them all, yeah, we would love to see all of those, because it does help us in filling out the paperwork and just kind of screening for any other potential benefits that could be, and just really doing a deep dive on what could be available. That would be the most important thing. You know, if somebody does have medical from a civilian source, like I mentioned, they don't have to have what's coming from a VA facility or a DOD facility. On the claim, we would just need to call out the location and the date range of that information. The VA will gather that. But any civilian medical records that are going to support either the diagnosis, the ongoing treatment, it is good for us to take a look at those, but it is not necessary to have that up front. The most important thing is going to be that DD 214, and I encourage people to take some time to think, to make a list, either mentally, on paper, start going from head to toe. What are things that currently are health diagnosis or health issues for you, And, is there a way that we can tie that to your active duty time frame? And, we look into also, like, are there secondary things that can be onto other things? Because that's a way of really building that claim out to get that percentage higher. And then there's going to be some things that we may see on the DD 214 that might lead to some presumptive questions that we might be asking for something that could be a presumptive claim. Now, in a presumptive claim, you need a component. So that's the standard would be like Vietnam. We see that someone is served in Vietnam, and we would go, oh, okay, well, let's ask the questions. Do you have these health conditions that are presumptive? If they do, then you don't need the nexus for those. The nexus is conceded in the presumptive part that the VA has already recognized and, acknowledged.
Okay. So to build out on what things could be. So I know a lot of folks, historically, it's getting better nowadays, have always associated it needs to be a combat injury and to receive disability compensation. And that's not true. Can you share a little bit about injuries and illnesses that are available for disability compensation?
Well, I mean, the rule of thumb is kind of if anything that happened to you while you were on a period of active duty. So I've worked with people that are on a period of leave, and they're on active duty, but they were off on the weekend or off doing some activities and got an injury, motorcycle accident. I think I've seen like some kind of surfing accident. So just so long as it's covered on a period of active duty, all that stuff is game. The whole thing behind it really, though, is that if you had, let's say it was a motorcycle accident, so you wiped out the bike, you went to the medical facility, they bandaged your wounds and maybe put you in a sling, and you healed up just fine.
Mm-hmm.
Then that's not necessarily going to be disability claim, because disability is going to have to do with what you're dealing with today, how that is affecting your life and disabling you from what you would be if you hadn't had that experience. So pretty much anything's game, but it does have to be able to show that it was pretty much chronic and ongoing, and to the present day you have a diagnosis for that thing or something similar enough.
So it can be an injury that occurred during your leave time, or maybe a training incident. Maybe it was something that you had coming into the service, like a football injury that was made worse, for miles and miles of running. If you're an infantryman, those type of things are all things that you have seen.
Yep, it's like sprained ankles, broken bones, just fall injuries. All that stuff is game if it's a current problem for you as well. That is really the key to it. And I say that's why the whole working with a VSO, you can kind of talk out some of that stuff. Just exposures alone are not going to be something that can be claimed. So for example, I just go back to Vietnam because it's the easiest one. To say, oh, I want to claim Agent Orange. Well, you can't. There's, you were exposed to something, but let's talk about what that could have created. So, the same, if you're talking Gulf War, you're going to be talking exposures. You can't claim like burn pit. You can't claim an exposure, but you can claim something that you believe is a result of the exposure.
Okay. Now, you did mention DD-214s. If somebody doesn't have that documentation, is that something that you can help them find, or is there a resource out there that individuals can get this information from?
Yes, we actually have a wonderful resource at the state of Michigan through the MVAA Resource Center. They have access to several databases where they're able to look and pull almost on a moment's notice those documents. They will normally need signature from from the veteran or the next of kin or the requesting party, and maybe extra documentation in that case. But they can generally, they're pretty good about being able to find stuff, and if it exists in what they have, you can have it right away. If not, then normally you will have to go through the, it's archives.gov, where you can do it online. The caveat with that is you do have to fax a signature sheet to them that has to kind of end up on their end, mirroring up with your online request. And if it doesn't quite do that, then that is not as successful. But there is also a form called SF, so Sam Frank 180, which that is the paper version of doing it. But at times it is almost more successful in trying to do it online, just because it has to, those two things have to meet on their end. And if something goes wrong, then the request just dissolves. The online request will just dissolve after a time period without the other page. So yes, that is something that VSO can assist with. It is something that can take some time if you have to go out into archives to try to get it. So we always try with the state of Michigan with the Resource Center first, because if they have it, then, all of that extra has been avoided.
Wonderful. Okay, I know you mentioned that each individual person's circumstances are a little bit different, but on average, how long does it normally take somebody's claim from start until a decision is made?
So if it's a first time claim, it's going to be a little different than another claim after the first one. The initial claim, I mean, these days it honestly, I would love to say it takes less. I'm going to give you a really, really wide range. I have seen them go as quickly as 3 months, but that is really rare. Normally it's 9 to 12 on the other end of that. Sometimes I've seen it go 24. That is, again, the rarity. And let me explain a little bit about how they do it, so it kind of can make some sense as to why it could potentially take long and the variables that might make it take longer. So what they do is every time the VA will do an action on a claim, they put the claim in suspense for 30 days. So it basically is not able to be scheduled for work while it's in suspense. So, 30 days to send away or ask for, let's say, National Guard records, to ask for active duty records. All of that is kind of a singular action that happens in 30 days. It's not like, hey, I'm going to ask for all these things at once. It just goes very linear for them. So, they'll ask for the active records first, then they'll go after the National Guard records. If they don't get them in 30 days, the claim comes out of suspense, goes back into someone's work queue, and they go, okay, do I have those records? If the answer is no, they may make a second request and it'll go in for 30 days. I mean, they'll do that for a reasonable time frame. I don't see them normally ending up doing that more than 3 times. After the second time, or maybe the third time, they're going to send a letter to the veteran saying, hey, we tried to get your records. We can't get them. If you have them, please send them. But I have seen some really linger at the point where they're asking internally to kind of verify certain dates, times, places, and they're not getting responses. So that's where sometimes things can run really on the long end of a decision because of that. And I think, okay, well, on one hand, I go, oh, my gosh, why, why do they keep on asking? I mean, to me, I see that as a positive. I think it is much better for them to take the extra time to do the diligence needed to be able to answer the questions they need answered to hopefully make the best possible decision. If they were to just go ahead and ask once and say, oh, well, and move on, chances are the claim would be denied. And it is much harder to come back from a denial than it is to, get it up front. Because when you get a denial, it's very arbitrary what they're going to see as new and material evidence. And you can kind of make a lot of shots to think that you have that or try to have that and keep on getting denied. And it can get even more frustrating when that happens. So I say, let them take the time up front to get the decision right. And even though it takes a lot longer to get it, it is much better than just a quick denial.
Great. So we have about 5 minutes left. I have received a few questions in from employees via email prior to this event. If anybody who is online that did not submit a question beforehand, feel free and drop one in the chat if you have, and we'll try and make our way through these with the time that we have left. So we have many employees who have either recently left active duty or they have returned from a deployment with the National Guard or Reserve unit. Can you elaborate on the importance of them filing a disability compensation claim within that first year of separating from the military or coming off of active duty?
Certainly. So the reason that there's two reasons that's important. The first one is that it's going to go then to the day after your separation for your effective date for any back pay that would be issued for a positive, decision. And then the other part is that the VA almost views that year after as almost an extended time frame, so that if you didn't have something in your service records, but you developed it within a year after discharge, it can almost count as the same thing to them. So that's why it's important to do it as soon as possible.
Okay. And then on the flip side, we do have many employees who have been out for several years, and they haven't necessarily looked into any VA disability compensation, and they're not sure what injuries or illnesses they are experiencing now are in their military medical records. So what would you recommend them doing on trying to get their affairs in order so they can file a claim?
Well, there's two different schools of thought on that. Some people do like to get their records and go through them to just refresh their memory on something that they may not have remembered that may have happened. Other people, the VA is going to get your records. So if you're reasonably sure about something, if you, the only part that doesn't work so well on is if you don't remember if it was the right or the left leg, and both of them are giving you problems today. It's worth getting those records, because if you ask for the wrong leg thinking that you remember, it can make it a lot messier down the road to get that straightened out. But the VA is going to gather those records as well. So if you're reasonably sure, you don't need to have the records up front to file the claim. You can actually get the records after the fact by requesting your VA file, and then you'll have everything that the VA has gathered for you. It's up to I really feel it's up to each individual. Some people are like, okay, let's decide to just see what happens, and let's decide, or some people are like, let's be certain, let's be precise, so it just is really up to the person. But there's different, there's kind of different ways that a VSO can kind of help walk through. And I think it's a good conversation to have, because a lot of times I'll talk to people and there's things that I'll ask questions and they're like, well, I didn't really think about that. So sometimes that conversation can really lead to really making the claim more comprehensive than it might have been otherwise.
Okay, and then maybe our final question. So we have employees that either live or work in nearly every county in Michigan. I know some people are okay working in a virtual environment to get support. Some people prefer in person. Where or how can our employees find a veteran service officer, if that's the path they choose, that is located near them, that they can work with in person or in a virtual environment?
There is a wonderful website that the state of Michigan puts out that MVAA maintains, and it has coverage in every county, searchable by county. So that you are able to, if you prefer to work with someone in your county or someone you can, sit down with in your community, you can see everybody that's available in that community. So if people want to work together virtually, I am happy to do that with you. We'll put my contact information in there. And, that's another way to just even start the conversation. We can talk about things. And then if you decide you want to go into your community, you'll at least maybe have some of your questions answered to determine that that's what you want to do.
Okay. Well, that ended up being our last question. I do appreciate you taking some time on this Monday, Cynthia, to join us and sharing some of your wisdom from your past 10 years as being a veteran service officer. So I definitely appreciate it. I'll make sure that your contact information gets shared out, as well as the recording of this to all of our employees and family members who weren't able to join us today. So again, thank you. And we appreciate you coming in, and everybody else in attendance. Thank you for taking some time out of your workday to join us. I hope you learned something. And if you have any other questions or follow-ups, feel free to reach out to me or Cynthia, and we'll do our best to connect you and get you those answers. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.